We're not there yet.
This is a video about games. I've always been wanting to talk about how to start in Infinity N4, like really into the minutia, kind of the granular, how do you get into this game? And I think one video I've been wanting to make for a long time, and I'm happy to make now, is what is the best army to start with, and what might be some armies that would be challenging to start with. If you're a stranger to the game, you might be wondering which army's for me, and you also might be wondering who this stranger is next to me. And you'll find out both of those answers in this video. Roll the intro. Welcome to Corner Case, the channel where we did the math, and it is for the elite 0.05% of wargamers. You're in the hobby corner with me, your best friend, your Ash Ketchum, and your host, Dek.
And I am your rival, your Gary Oak, Dak.
Whoa, you're Gary?
Yes.
You're also Dek?
You're also...
What? The same guy? Oh my god. Yes, that's right. Is this going to get confusing? Do we both have the same name? Yes, actually, because I'm Dek, he's Dek. We've both been playing minigames since forever, like 2015, I believe. And I can't think of a better person to talk to you about games than Dek, because I'm a painter. You're really good at playing the game. I think you won something recently.
That's right. I won the Krug just last weekend.
Sorry, what's the Krug?
The Krug, the Colorado Krug, is Colorado's largest Infinity tournament and part of the Four Corners tournament circuit.
The Four Corner tournament circuit. That's one corner trophy to put in your case. We went there. Okay, so today, what's the topic? How do you get into Infinity N4? What army is the best to pick? And what armies might be challenging? I mean, it seems like an obvious topic to do, but I have a specific reason. And my reason is because I learned the game on Steel Phalanx. And what does that mean? It means, if you're a noob, you might not know this right away, but it means mimetism -6. It means eclipse smoke. It means throwing a 40-point beefy boy into your opponent's deployment zone and just stranding him there and then just letting them deal with it. So what does that mean? I feel like learning the game on Steel Phalanx, I didn't actually learn how to play Infinity, the game, like normal. And it wasn't until I switched over to playing OSS where I realized, oh, face-to-face rolls actually can be kind of dangerous, and this 12-point guy can actually score points and do things sometimes. So I kind of feel like Steel Phalanx was a lot of fun, but I kind of felt like I was missing out on a lot of the core Infinity experience. So I thought, let's talk about if I were to do that again and I was mostly concerned about the gameplay, how would I start? Okay, before we get into our listicle here, we're going to go over what we used as criteria to judge what were the best and what were the most challenging armies to start N4 with. And by we, I mean Dak, actually. So what were your requirements?
So one of the things that I always look for in any game whatsoever is simple rules. Low rules count, and something that's not particularly complicated to learn. Anything that has a robust system and doesn't necessarily require you to memorize more and more parts as you build your army or your faction helps a lot. The next part I really look for is forgiveness. Something that when you're playing the game or when you're learning the game doesn't necessarily punish you for making mistakes. It might be noticeable and cause problems, but not necessarily will lose you the game outright. And finally, the last thing I always look for when you're building a new faction or starting a new game is intuitive design. You want a unit that looks and does the thing that you want it to do. You want it to look, if you've got a big old rocket launcher, you want the rocket launcher to hit like a truck.
Yeah, we were talking about tags. You kind of want, if you have a tag unit, it looks like it's going to do damage and it's going to be survivable.
Right.
Yeah, some units, like maybe the Sphinx, if you're new, might look like a tag, but might play a little differently.
Right. It's not necessarily tough. It does hit, but it doesn't necessarily break through any things you want. So when you play it, it's going to be very sneaky. It's going to move around, and that's not something you think about when you're playing a giant armored mech.
And when you say complicated rules, you might mean things that maybe like an army specific kind of rule, or maybe something that doesn't show up too often in other armies but only in this one.
Exactly. You're looking for as many generic rules as possible, and preferably as few but as powerful as possible. Ignoring rules is a very powerful effect that also helps you not have to remember the baseline rules as much as possible.
Okay, and last thing is we are including both vanilla and sectorial armies in our listicle going forward. And with that said, let's get going. Okay, number one, and in no particular order, 3 armies that are easy or a good ramp into N4. First one is
Morats. Morats is a very intuitive design. They're big old monkey boys that will charge in. They have one universal rule called Veteran, which allows them to ignore the loss of lieutenant rule. It's very intuitive, and even though they have fire teams, which is a somewhat advanced rule, they're all very intuitively built and easy to maintain. So you don't have to remember as many pieces, and you don't have to worry about as many exceptions.
Yeah, so being able to ignore loss of lieutenant is like a really great benefit. I remember, again, like starting with Steel Phalanx, sometimes I would have my lieutenant like in an offensive position, and sometimes I'd lose them. So I think loss of lieutenant is a part of the game, and it can be pretty devastating.
It can be. It can definitely be something that a newer player wouldn't necessarily be able to capitalize on or understand what the problem is, and so being able to ignore that is an intrinsically valuable skill.
And I might be revealing my lack of prep here, but I do think they have like religious. I think a lot of them have
Some
religious.
of them have religious. It helps you ignore guts checks. One of those. It's an aspect of the game that not a lot of people, even the more advanced players, will remember. So having that built in is a convenience.
And I think that's like, it's one of those examples you said of being able to ignore rules, right? Because
Exactly.
religious, it's not like courage. Like courage is a rule that lets you choose.
Yep.
But religious is a rule that lets you ignore a guts check.
Right.
Actually, you don't have a choice. You
don't
just
have
have
a choice.
to.
You must ignore without
Yeah.
trying to roll for the opposite.
So that's actually awesome. So it being able to cut out sections of like the rule set makes it really, really easy to ramp into.
Very intuitive. Number two is military orders. Military orders is another religious group. They are very intuitive in the fact that they're big old space knights. They just charge down the road and will fight you in melee. They're very forgiving. The majority of them have 2 wounds, which is twice the survivability of the average trooper. They also have very intuitive design in the fact that they have if they have a big gun, they're probably going to shoot you. They also don't necessarily need to worry about groups. They have very defined groups, and sometimes you can just take the biggest group possible, the biggest fire team possible, and just chunk them up with heavy infantry and just run them down the road.
Yeah, so military orders, they're a part of Pan-Oceania. Are they... I mean, I face them, but I don't have, like, familiarity with their profiles, right? At least not off the top of my head. But, like, do they have, like, the benefit of what we consider, like, the Pano stat line?
They do have the Pano stat line. They have probably the highest standard ballistic skill in the game, so they're very easy to shoot with. That interaction is very helpful in the fact that you don't need to worry about any setup. You can just proceed as you wish, and 90% of the time, it'll be your ability to do a stat check.
Yeah, so that sounds like just being good at the core game of Infinity, like face-to-face rules. I think that's like a pretty like good benefit for starting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so rather than, like, again, coming from Steel Phalanx, like, Mimetism -6, kind of, like, I feel like it kind of blinded me to the reality of doing a face-to-face rule.
Right.
Because you're in cover, and then you're Mimetism -6, so, like, opponents have -9 to shoot you if they even could.
Right.
Because you have smoke, and versus Pano, and military orders, it sounds like if you just have a good stat block, then like, you still you're not shielded from the reality of a face-to-face roll, but you are a little bit better at winning them.
Right. You're more statistically likely to succeed while maintaining the key aspect of Infinity, which is risk assessment.
And also Space Knights. That's like pretty much the standard ramp in
Just
for like any war game.
Just the classic. Sometimes you just gotta go in and be like, this is what I like.
Yeah. Okay, and again, revealing my lack of prep. We barely pre-gamed before this, so having, experiencing this list as we're talking about it, I'm starting to see, the two armies we just talked about, I think, if I'm not wrong, are more like a heavy infantry or like
Heavy and
lower
medium.
model count, potentially, armies.
Not necessarily lower model count, higher armor stats.
Higher armor stat.
Morats doesn't necessarily have 1 wound, but they do have 2 armor, and they'll be a little bit more forgiving, and more higher ballistic skill stats and higher burst value stats.
Nice. Okay. Well, I mean, they look chunky. They're the chunkiest.
They're big
looking
boys, yeah.
Yeah, and that actually makes them easy to paint. So we're not talking about painting, we're talking about gaming, but just saying if you're into the hobby that they're, they're a little bit thicker, they're a little bit newer too. And then last favorite army to ramp into N4 is
Rama. Rama is a Haqqislam sub-faction. They have a lot of intuitive design. They have got a big chunky alpha seed. He has got a big old rocket launcher. You shoot him with it, and then you got a good old armor save. No problems. They also have an incredibly powerful core system, which is which allows you to understand defense and statistical averages and how to utilize and not have to worry about cover nearly as much. It's a nice combination of the ability to negate rules while still simultaneously having to understand your risk assessment. They also have the classic ability of Haqqislam, which is they have shotguns, which is the understanding of templates and how to use templates effectively.
template weapons.
Template weapons. The way around mimetism, as a matter of fact.
Yes, and the way around face-to-face rolls, potentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you started with Haqqislam
I did.
as a faction, right? You didn't start with Rama, though.
No, I didn't start with Rama. I took a little bit harder route, and I started with assassins, who are exceedingly short range. Knowing how to leverage that is difficult. And fortunately, Rama doesn't necessarily suffer from that. They have a few close and far range attacks, so they can ramp into either direction.
And Rama, like we talked about on the channel before, link in the description or somewhere up there, is like the super soldier program, right? So these are your like Captain America types, not
Exactly.
America though, Haqqislam. You get Tariq, I think, is
Tariq Mansouri,
the
that's
big,
right.
the thick boy.
The OG super soldier.
Yeah.
He got super juiced up with the super surgical serum, so he's like twice as big as everyone else. And then he's the leader of the crap, I forgot what it was.
Lore.
We're not there yet.
This is a video about games. This is about the gaming part.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Yeah, so, and this is the faction that gets Maggie.
It is.
×2.
That's right. The double Maggie list. You can also run the double Maggie list, which not necessarily the best starter situation, but super fun and also really entertaining and intuitive.
So what I'm hearing is, if you like characters, if you like memeing, you got
to run the Rama. That's right.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's the super soldier angle. Sorry, mechanically, what do they get? They get like super jump or something.
Mechanically, they don't actually have a lot of a super advanced mechanics, which is kind of why they're very useful as a starting army. They don't force you into you still learn the base rules, but they don't have a lot of advanced rules either. There's marksmanship, kind of, and then there is the Namur, which are total immunity, which is a very important skill, but not necessarily something you have to keep track of. But again, it is a negating skill.
Okay, that's good. So those were our 3 easy to ramp into N4 armies. Okay, next on our list, the exact opposite of that. What are 3 armies that are challenging to get into N4 with?
Personally, one of the biggest problems that I experienced with Infinity was understanding how to utilize orders and also one of the most unintuitive parts of it was the use of rems. Rems are the robot aspect, the little robot Tachimoto friends that you receive that you'll use pretty much in any faction, but the one that use it the most is going to be Aleph. And vanilla Aleph is the most egregious user of them. They'll use very low stat units and also very specific rule sets that you have to know and be able to utilize effectively in order to utilize the army to its optimal purposes. And that's why it creates kind of the exact opposite. You have to know how every part works, and you have to know your niche cases, especially with post-humans, which have proxy, and that'll cause new players a lot of problems.
Yeah, it was kind of weird ramping into Aleph and realizing I was kind of min-maxing my army, where I'm like starting a list with like 2 net rods and like 2 flash bots already.
Right.
And then you throw like your post-human doctor or something in there, and then they got the 2 Yud bots with them.
Exactly.
And then like all of a sudden I just counted like six things that aren't even like really doing that much. And then sometimes you got like the what's the bigger base size one? The Probot?
Yeah,
the Probot.
That's right, the EvoBot, yeah.
The EvoBot. Oh my god. So then actually my army's already at like 6 or 7 tiny little robot things.
Right. That are just sitting around just kind of providing orders.
And
learning how to use that is a very difficult aspect of the game.
Yeah, I feel like Aleph has like a pretty big toolkit from like my experience, but yes, with in Magic sometimes like you just want to play like mono red burn or something, and just really top deck to the win. And I feel like Aleph isn't that.
No. It's definitely the silver bullet. I've got the big thing that just hits you really hard.
Yeah, it's right tool for the job. So it probably, I don't know. I'm not that good, but I'm sure like a better player is like really rewarded by the toolkit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's maybe not the best for new players. No. Okay, next is
Shazvasti. Shazvasti is the kind of spy / network / the elites version of the combined army. They're very, very stealthy. They utilize camouflage and the Shazvasti rule significantly, and it almost rely upon it. They have very niche units. They have one of the 2 impersonation 1 units in the game, in the Speculo Killer, which is a very high skill, very unique, and very niche ability. So and they have the Sphinx that you're talking about, a very unintuitive, not necessarily forgiving unit that just kind of sums up the entirety of the faction.
Yeah, so it sounds kind of like, so I've only played against like Shazvasti rule like once or twice. And I remember like a moment like what the eggs came in, they dropped in, and then you got to guess which one is like the real one.
Yeah, with decoy, right?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So,
which can be a very negative player experience, on both ends, because you expect like, oh, like I shell gamed this guy really well, and then you're like, oh no, I didn't.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is like a specialist army. Like if you play this and you're serious about it, you gotta like really commit to be good.
Exactly. It's one of those units that it's one of those factions you just got to be able to be like, this is what I'm going to play. I'm going to play it this way, and this is going to work this way.
But this army has like so much visibility because of like the Defiance box and then like some of their they have like some of the newer models.
Right.
So like going into combined army, like Onyx needs a refresh. Obviously Morats just got refreshed and we just talked about them. But before Morats got refreshed, I think it was like within the last 12-month period, like Shazvasti was like pretty visible. Yeah, so that's kind of a challenge.
Yes, accessibility can be a big challenge when you're playing the game, especially if you're one of those people that really likes like WYSIWYG, which is what you see is what you get. That can be a problem, especially in the older factions. Some of the factions are actually out of print, but the beauty of Infinity specifically is the ability to proxy is actually part of the tournament rules.
Yeah, so you can get these models. People see them a lot because they're relatively new, but they may be challenging from a rules perspective to like tune them up to be performing well for you if you're new to this game.
Exactly.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of the Shazvasti rules and like the camouflage that they got and the infiltration is really like scalpel kind of playstyle.
Yes, very much
So
so.
you remove the thing that you need to remove, or you keep your models off the table until like the last minute.
Exactly.
I've seen people joke about like just playing Shaz and just keeping everything off the table till like turn 3.
Right. They're one of the lists that you can be like, all right, I'm gonna hand you a blank piece of paper, and just troll your opponent or just meme into.
Yeah, so it sounds really fun, but I feel like you got to play a lot of games to like get good.
It definitely has a higher skill curve.
Yeah. All right, and our last challenging army to get into is
Our last challenging army is Merovingia, the French sectorial of Ariadne. They're very difficult to get in for a number of reasons. They have very low toolkit, very specific rules in the fact that they have very fragile units that need to be played very specifically, and they have only like 1 or 2 rules attached to them. And they're very fragile, so not forgiving in the sense of if you get hit, you're going to stay up or something like that. And timing is critical with Merovingia, and they don't necessarily. And a new player, I can't necessarily expect a new player to learn how to use that.
Yeah, I think this is another army that we just talked about accessibility. This is one of the absolutely super out of print armies right here.
Absolutely, yes.
This is an army that's got a lot of camouflage mechanics
It
again.
does.
And just to get into that a little bit, like I remember playing against TAC for the first time, Tartary Army Corps, and it was really fun for me. But at that point, I'd been playing for like 6+ months. The first time I had to play against an Ariadne army, and that experience was good. But if I was like brand new to the game, and every ARO you got to think twice, like am I going to discover, am I not going to discover, or on the player side, like am I going to reveal, am I not going to reveal, you know? And then the shell game of like trying to keep track of like which models are markers and which markers are models and which markers are mines, you know, or decoys. Oh my gosh, it just like ups your accounting to the max, and every single player decision, there's just a lot more of them. So I feel like that play style of like not necessarily a low model count army, potentially a higher model count army depending on the list you build, and then you have the potential of like decoys. Oh my goodness, so overwhelming if you're new.
Yeah, logistical overload is a thing.
Yeah, don't do that to yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, and
it's
they
not
don't
great.
even look that cool. There's like the normie humans.
No, they're
like-
older sculpts. They've kind of got the anaconda, which is cool but so fragile.
Oh, is theirs the anaconda?
They're the only ones. Before Cosmo Flop, they were the only ones with tags. Yeah,
I thought the anaconda was the. I think of the anaconda as like the NA2
it is
kind of tag.
Yeah, that's right. But they were the first Ariadne faction to get a tag, and
Oh man, that's so funny.
it's a bunch of backdealing.
That's pretty cool. That kind of makes me want to modify like a anaconda with like a baguette or something. It's got the sword, right? So you just put a little baguette on it.
You get the baguette. You get a little mustache on there.
French internet, don't come to this video. Sorry. All right, that was our list of 3 great armies to start N4 as a new player, and 3 challenging armies to have a challenging time getting into N4 with. If you liked the content, if you have any questions or comments, obviously leave them below. Thank you to all. Thank you for all the likes and the subscribes. Join us on the Discord or anytime. I've been Dek, and
I'm Dak,
best friend
worst enemy.
or rival, up to you. Red, blue.
Blue.
See you next time.